Hello and welcome to another edition of Access Asia. Here's what's coming up. We'll be taking you to some of the bustling busties of India, where the coronavirus infection and fatality rates have dropped. This despite the central government maintaining that social distancing is the best tool to stop the virus from spreading. A video showing yet another Bangladeshi woman being attacked and sexually assaulted sparks a huge wave of protests across the country. And in the land where COVID-19 first appeared, Chinese holidaymakers are being forced to scrap their ambitious or luxury overseas travel plans to set up camp on home turf instead. Now, while many governments are urging people to keep a safe distance to prevent a further mushrooming of COVID-19, some scientists believe the best way to tackle the virus is by grouping together and through herd immunity. In India, where the devastating pandemic has hit particularly hard, there's been a noticeable fall in the infection rate in certain densely populated areas. Ellen Gainsford reports.
In this Mumbai slum, with shacks stacked one on top of the other, social distancing is impossible. But the number of deaths from the coronavirus have been relatively low. Officially, there have been a few thousand. After a spike in May, figures have stabilized and then dropped. The opposite trend to the rest of the country. The same pattern is repeated in other slums in New Delhi.
In the beginning, I was scared, but we will stay and live with the virus.
In some areas, studies show nearly 60% of the population have developed antibodies. But could this mean collective immunity?
I don't know why exactly, but I feel like we have the power to fight this illness.
There's a debate between specialists about what the findings mean. Many doctors say India is too large and too highly populated for collective immunity to work.
Herd immunity is a joke in India. If you're talking about herd immunity, you're expecting 1 million people in India to die. So can we choose who should die, who should not die? So there is no concept of herd immunity at this moment and any time for this particular disease here.
But this epidemiologist believes that's what the data shows is happening.
One, the serosurveillance data, and two, the data of declines in cases being reported from the area. The two together tell me that it's likely it's herd immunity. This to me is what could be the picture in large parts of India once the virus spreads further and further.
For now, the Indian government's official policy discounts the idea of collective immunity. So social distancing and hygiene measures remain key to fighting the pandemic.
Now, according to one Bangladeshi human rights group, over 900 women and girls have been raped there in the first 9 months of this year alone. Huge protests have taken place in a string of cities triggered by the circulation of a video showing another attack on a woman in the south of the country. Brian Quinn has more.
In Dhaka, an outpouring of anger continuing to rage. Weeks after the sexual assault of a woman by a gang of men was shared widely on social media.
I stand here so that I will not become the next woman to be the victim of rape, the next victim of violence.
The protests are unprecedented, both for their persistence and for their largely female leadership in the highly conservative Muslim-majority country, as Bangladesh struggles to come to terms with a growing problem. According to one NGO, more than 900 women and girls were raped in the first 9 months of 2020 alone, with gang rapes accounting for more than 200 of those incidents. Those figures are likely a significant underestimation, as they represent only reported cases. Punishment is rare. Bangladesh's conviction rate for rape cases is less than 1%. In a 2013 UN survey, 95% of urban Bangladeshi men who admitted committing rape reported facing 0 consequences. Rights groups blame a culture of impunity and a slow-moving legal system that shifts blame to the victim, while suspects are often protected by the powerful based on political affiliations.
There's often violence against women. Women, even children, are victims of rape. But the culprits are not punished, and now we want justice.
The public blowback has forced the government to react, with the cabinet of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina approving the death penalty for rape cases as of October 13th. Critics say the measure could actually decrease the conviction rate and that the government should instead focus on enforcement as well as passing long-promised sexual harassment and witness protection laws.
Next, before a trusted vaccine was discovered, polio used to kill hundreds of thousands of youngsters each year. But sadly, in the Philippines, false information spread online by members of an anti-vaxxer movement has led to many parents refusing to protect their children.
4 doses of this vaccine can protect a child for life and help to wipe out a disease that used to devastate hundreds of thousands of lives each year. Polio can cause lifelong paralysis, and there's no cure. It can only be prevented. But misinformation being spread online is putting off some people from vaccinating their children.
There is fear na involved doon. Once you tap that fear, I think, once you tap that fear factor, ang bilis ng pagbabago ng isip at matagal mawala sa isip nila. So,
childhood immunization rates have plummeted in the Philippines from 87% in 2014 to 68% in 2019, resulting in a measles epidemic and the re-emergence of polio last year, 19 years after the disease was eradicated in the country. On social media, conspiracy theories falsely claiming people have died after taking vaccines are having an effect. They're even slowing the uptake for annual flu shots.
Elderly people were lining up here before, but they suddenly stopped wanting to get inoculated. They said it's because of Facebook, that there's a report that people who'd been vaccinated in Tarlac had died. They didn't have any proof, they just heard about it.
Most of the Philippines' 73 million internet users have a Facebook account. And despite a government campaign to combat conspiracy theories, fake stories spread by anti-vaxxer groups can spread like wildfire. This misinformation could prove deadly and lead to a resurgence in preventable diseases. There are worries that if public opinion turns against vaccines, it could have serious consequences for any future COVID-19 immunization campaign.
Now, on paper, a stone wall is hardly a plump or inviting place to put up a tent and unfurl a sleeping bag. But with the COVID-19 pandemic keeping many borders closed and flights grounded, people in China are turning to staycations and are breaking with their usual creature comforts at one of their country's most iconic and longest monuments. Diptyque Laurent explains.
It's a camper's dream, pitching a tent and sleeping under the stars on one of the 7 wonders of the world, the Great Wall of China. For these Chinese tourists, however, it's a giant step out of their comfort zone.
Most of them have never camped before, so they're completely underprepared. They don't even have water.
No suitcases or bellhops here. The visitors had to haul their own gear 500 meters uphill. Half an hour later, they arrived. The next step was pitching their tents. For this accountant from Beijing, it was a completely foreign experience.
I think you have to put this thing inside. It's the first time I'm pitching a tent. Thank God I have some help.
Camping on the Great Wall costs 40 euros a night, and it's organized by tour operators. But for many, it was more a one-off experience rather than a new way of traveling.
I'm doing this just once to try it out, but a hotel is still much more comfortable. Where am I going to take a shower?
At sunrise the next day, they were treated to a spectacular sight, the Great Wall of China, bathed in morning light. After a quick hair and makeup session, it was time for photos.
The Great Wall is an architectural marvel, and on top of that, it's practically empty. I feel like it just belongs to me.
After a not-so-glamorous night sleeping rough, the tourists headed back down. The pandemic and health restrictions have seen camping reservations on the Great Wall of China double this year, but Chinese tourists are yet to be seduced by the great outdoors. Just 70,000 Chinese people go camping each year, compared to 6 million here in France.
And we end this programme with some hidden messages lying deep in the South Korean countryside. They may look similar to alien crop circles, but they are in fact the intricate handiwork of local farmers and children in the paddy fields around Suncheon. Among the images, which can only really be appreciated from the air, is one which says, "Take heart, Korea," a message of goodwill to the country as it battles on against COVID-19. Now, in order to protect the images from hungry birds who come to feed in these rice fields, an army of scarecrows in traditional Korean attire have been drafted in. And that's all from me and the Access Asia team, but do stay with us here on France 24.